time for the Gathering Podcast.
All right, Martin.
Qasim.
First up, season 2, episode 1. We talked with Shawn Draisey. So what are your takeaways from this conversation?
I was most excited about hearing how Shawn transitioned his career. He was a recruiter back in the day when you used to dial up, and he explains it's not going to be useful for right now, but what's most interesting is that he takes all of that like hungry, scrappy recruiter mindset and he shows you how he's applying it today with the technology that's available. And so, yeah, he used to dial for dollars, basically, literally just dialing into corporate numbers and then just punching extensions blindly and just saying, hey, can I get a hold of so-and-so until he got the right person.
And I think that's an interesting thing in this episode that kind of like comes out is, I guess, it's social engineering. That's what we called it in hacker culture back in the 90s. We called it social engineering, where you're literally doing whatever you can to figure out organizational structures, how to navigate them, and how to get what you need from a company, because a company really is just a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So who does what? Who likes doing what, and who can you actually communicate with at a company to get what you want from them.
Valuable skills as a recruiter and any people operations person, really.
Absolutely. So, Shawn Draisey, first episode, season 2 of the Gathering Podcast.
Listen to the people. Listen to the people. People and culture. Oh, yeah. It's time for the Gathering Podcast. Time for the Gathering Podcast.
Shawn Draisey,
that is me.
Thank you for joining us in studio today.
You're quite welcome. It's my pleasure.
It is wonderful to have you here. We have a little bit of career history because you worked for one of StartWell's clients.
I did.
That was an office tenant in 2018-19.
Yes.
And have since changed roles. We'll get into your career history.
Okay.
But I'd like to know the backdrop, and I think a lot of our audience enjoys hearing the backdrop of, you know, how you found yourself in like people and culture, HR. What's that all about?
How far do you want me? We got all day.
Yeah, well, let's start at the beginning. I mean, like, did you have a passion for, you know, helping people? This is something we hear a lot.
I'm going to say yes, that has changed. So if we go way back.
That has changed. You're like, I hate people now.
I was supposed to be an RCMP, so I wanted to be a mounted policeman. I went into recruiting after I graduated university, failed the eye test.
Kept falling off the horse.
Yep. Sorry, nothing we can do for you, buddy. I'm colorblind, believe it or not, so I didn't know that till I was 21 years of age.
That's great.
So the helping piece or the group dynamics piece, I was teaching kids karate at the time.
You didn't know that you were colorblind until
until
you applied to be mounted police.
Until I took the test and I failed the plate test.
Okay.
There's a color plate test. So,
wow.
Teaching kids karate, was good with the kids. One of the parents, this guy's name was Paul Sanuda, said, you ever thought about social work? No. So I was out of university, unemployed, didn't know what to do, wandering the streets, I guess, as a youth, as a 20-year-old youth. So I applied to get into social work, and I did. I became a social worker. I worked young offenders, child welfare. I was a corrections officer, believe it or not, for some time.
Wow.
That's got a high burnout rate.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was looking for something synonymous, akin to social work. Career development presented itself.
Mm-hmm.
Went back to school. Funny enough, worked at a hotel at night, put myself through school through the day in career development. Ended up at the federal government doing, we'll call it second career stuff, career development.
So wait, as you're figuring out what your career is, you're studying career development?
Exactly.
Okay, and then starting to work in career development.
Exactly. Isn't that fascinating?
That is fascinating.
It's so I did that for 3 years. I ran a thing called the Job Find Club in London, Ontario, and that is job search or career development, if you will. So I did a little bit of lecturing at UWO, Ivy School of Business, before it was big. And somebody said, you know, you're really good on both sides of the table. You're good with the employers. You're good with the clients. You're good with the matching. Be a recruiter. And so the thing is, recruiters get paid a lot more than career counselors. So I dove into that. And in the beginning, I was running a manufacturing desk. I was on the back end I was doing sourcing for the account managers. And believe it or not, this was, I'm going to say mid-2000s.
Okay.
So we were still on big green screens, believe it or not.
In the mid-2000s.
In the mid-2000s at this recruiting company.
You mean like monochrome?
Monochrome.
You're on like IBM XTs.
Big dot.
Back of a manufacturing facility.
Olivetti's. We're on Olivetti's, believe it or not.
Okay.
So we still had paper files.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. I think some people were still on dial phones. And exactly, I'm glad I got on that. The piece with this was I was the sole recruiter or sourcer. And I had the orders would come in on a big whiteboard. We were running automotive manufacturing recruiting. So I was doing anything Detroit to Ottawa, tier 1, tier 2 OEM, and engineers, you name it, anybody in manufacturing. I was doing 75 to 100 calls per day. So I was calling into the Dura Automotives, the machine shops in Windsor, pulling. I was just pulling. And I had about a 24-hour fill time where I had to get resumes over to the AMs to get them in to send out and process. So I did that. That was commission only. My first placement was for a corporate controller at Tecumseh Manufacturing in London. Small motor manufacturer.
London, Ontario for our international
London,
audience.
Ontario, Canada. So I did that. And the funny thing was, this was a group of people that have been doing this since the early 70s.
Right.
So
that's when they bought all that gear, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the guy running the company had been in the game, like when there was no when headhunting was just, what's that?
Yeah.
He had been in the game since the 70s. So he knew
everyone in the sector.
He knew who's who. So there wasn't so much a big deal of getting clients in. But what this group didn't see is the gathering economic storm coming. So the great downturn hit.
You're talking 2008-9.
2008-9.
Yeah.
So we would have like probably $300,000 on the board in search. And one afternoon, you guys, the phone started ringing. Wipe, hold.
Cancel.
Off. We were running a contingency shop. So most of it was contingency. Some of it was pay up front.
Yeah.
Little bit of fee up front.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the bigger clients, okay, we need a little bit up front. Then we're going to pay once they get in. We're going to pay the rest in cash. So there was some retained work.
Yeah.
80% was contingent. So those calls came in, and you had $300,000 in business in process, gone. So I saw this group of business people just implode, just lose their minds. I left that. I went to run a full desk at a smaller shop in London that was in the small to medium-sized business end of things. So I ran both sides. And this is the funny story, and please feel free to step in, jokes. I got into chicken manufacturing. I got into ag business.
Oh my God. Chicken manufacturing. I love it. Not farming. It's manufacturing.
I got into to ag manufacturing. And the other thing, you'll laugh.
Yeah.
Tires. So we were hired by Cal Tire. And at that point in time,
same company, chickens and tires.
Chickens and tires. That's the claim to fame.
See, hipsters would love that on the board of a new restaurant.
Chicken and tires, tires and chicken.
There you go.
An emoji or something. Yeah.
So I did that, and the thing at that point in time, I'll say with those staple businesses, if you will.
Yeah. Chickens and tires, yeah.
They're not going anywhere. We need both of those.
You got to go places. You got to eat things.
I was recruiting general managers for tire stores in southwestern Ontario between London and Windsor.
Yeah.
and there was just these outlets that were servicing ag, big, we'll call it snowplow, stuff like that, like big earth moving companies. And so I did that. I was successful at that. The chicken piece is these were smaller engineering companies subbing to Maple Leaf Foods and some of the larger carriers in Ontario at the time to put in robots. So that was the big play. Mid to late 2000s was automating these chicken plants.
Yeah.
And I had to find
people to automate the chicken plant.
Those that have that background, those that were in chicken.
Yeah.
And that was, I gotta tell both of you, during that downturn, we did well. I did very well. So, I did so well that the owner of this company said, well, Shawn, we're going to make you a manager. So I ran the perm team. I had a whole sales team, and we had everybody in this really niche, weird, small businesses in southwestern Ontario. And, I got to say, we were quoting 25% cut.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing to it. Yep, no problem. So it wasn't 15% contingent, it was 25.
What does mean? Sorry, you're placing someone for a job, and you earn, as the person who places or finds that talent, you earn 25% of their annual salary for the first year.
Yeah, 25% of base. And I was quoting that in tires.
Yeah, so you're like filling these.
That's wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. What do you think? So there's definitely the lesson here in like niche, right?
There is, and that was part of why the owner and I had to go our separate ways, because you got to think around that time there was lots. The Great Recession was very.
I like how you call it the Great Recession.
The Great Depression,
very biblical
recession. Well, yeah, we can go that way if you want, but there was lots of. Nobody knew what was going to happen. It was the end of the world. Now, the funny thing is, as we talked very quickly, that was the birth of blockchain.
Yeah.
Well, in a big way. Blockchain had always been, or peer-to-peer sharing had been around for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lynn was very big on, you got to niche this, you got to niche that, and you got to run the team. So I was running a team. I was running a desk, and the owner and I didn't see eye to eye, because this was a very business-focused person, and I was very big on just being very grateful, not only to the candidates, but to the businesses that you got to hire and you got to pay your invoice. There's the other piece of contingency.
Right.
Not only do you have to hire, you got to pay us on time. So I would always do visits and say thank you and drop off cards and stuff like that, and tell a few funny stories. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, she wasn't into that, and I just went, we don't say thank you. You just got to stick to business. So I just went, that's not a warm fuzzy. Yeah. That's not who I am. So we parted ways, and I went to another shop in London. Sort of same thing. Mm-hmm. And I did agency, and I came to Toronto through the design group. So I ended up in London at Allen Personnel, doing the same thing, engineering, skilled trades. I ended up in Mississauga at the design group shop. And I'd been in agency for a bit, and sometimes you do well, and then sometimes you get into some of the larger firms where you've got people that have been there for 10, 20 years. They know everybody.
Right.
I can turn, you got a rec come in. I'm going to turn it around in maybe 2 hours, get this person in. They hire. I take full fee. Yeah. And everybody else has got birdseed. And I had a dear friend of mine that ended up getting out of agency. He was at CIBC. That's who I came to one of your things with. And he goes, oh, yeah. He says, you got to come in-house, man. You got to go in-house, Shawn.
Interesting.
It's a different vibe. You got to go in-house. And I go, okay.
Continue. I have questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did that.
Wait, I have questions. Let's pause here.
Okay,
so,
let's pause.
Because already you've talked about some very interesting stuff. Well, I find it interesting because I sit outside of this world a little bit, right? But so
the poultry tire world?
It's not my industry. It needs to be.
I haven't even got into soybeans yet. That's a whole nother topic.
It's a burgeoning industry, isn't it? It's huge. Okay. Huge. Huge.
Intermodal soybeans. That's for another day.
So you're trying to find people for skilled labor or unskilled labor, perhaps, but just a willingness to work in the
these
transformation of the chicken farms, chicken processing plants,
the obscure industries.
How do you find those people? Do you put ads on milk cartons?
No, but that's good. Like, there's so much I could do with that, but I'm not going to. A lot of that was still, I'm pulling, I'm on the phone.
But who are you calling?
I'm phoning the competition. So what I ended up doing for this little chicken integrator is I called everybody in southwestern Ontario. I called chicken farmers at their homes.
Yep.
I see. Okay.
I learned to go into what used to be called at businesses phone trees. Oh, you've reached ABC Incorporated, and if you want to talk to Jim Smith, press 1. I learned if you go in and you understand the phone system they've got, you can get the entire company names and all of their phone numbers if you just take your time.
Yep.
So I was going into some of the regional carriers in chicken and in ag after hours.
You can't say chicken and not get a little smile going.
Of course. Chicken's fun.
It's hilarious.
I think our CMP really missed out, to be honest with you.
Right? This man is an investigative
perspective. Like, how many more crimes would have been solved had they just like
chicken
overlooked
crimes?
This like colorblind piece, right?
But see, I do find this interesting, especially coming from that sales perspective, where like, you know, a lot of people, everyone has mixed emotions about this synonymity here, but I see like, you know, talent recruitment as sales. It's a sales
100%,
right?
100%. I caught the tail end of that wave of like dialing for dollars, basically, of like calling a company, just talking to the first person you can get a hold of, doesn't really matter who, and finding a way to be charismatic enough to get them to point you in the right phone direction, not the digital direction, but the telephonic direction. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
So you're hacking Rolodexes and building your own database of chicken people,
Pretty much.
to then, you know, ask around who's looking for work, and there's some good opportunity with this thing I got going here.
And the one thing so on that note, I wanted to pitch to both of you. So what essentially I was doing, I didn't know it at the time, is I was market mapping chicken per se.
Big poultry.
Because once I got into it, I knew, at least on the manufacturing engineering side, the GM, the ownership, I knew the families, I knew the inside scoop, I knew who was going to move, I knew who was applying for federal licensing. So I had that intel, if you will, that market map of this small niche. I like to say I knew stuff that the owners didn't even know before it happened. Now, the other neat thing maybe we can riff on here is we've lost that in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, unless, well, I guess, it's been nearly a decade and a half since the Great, what did you call it, the Great Depression?
The Great
Recession?
Depression.
Since the housing crisis of 2008 and 2009.
Yeah.
And things have changed dramatically in terms of the digitization of, you know, means of contact, of people databasing, and the way that people work. So tell us more about your lens on how things have kind of become disassociated.
Well, again, I'll pitch this, and please, both of you jump in. I get vendors calling me every day. Hey, see, you got you got this open, and give me 5 minutes. I go, hook it up. Okay, Shawn, I got this and this, and here's my price. I go, okay, so 2 questions. Are you market mapping? If I give you a company in a level, do you know who is there right now? Can you tell me their name and their number? Do you? In Toronto proper? Nope. Okay. Are you using open source? Are you using anything other than LinkedIn? I love LinkedIn. God love LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But the other piece is LinkedIn is a self-updated database, like it or not. I know Adam Gellert went into a little bit of, his riff on that.
Right.
There are people on other social platforms. There are people not on any social platforms at all. So as far as me giving you your fee, I need you to do more than say, I'm a good person. I'm on LinkedIn too, Shawn, and I can guarantee you this. So it's funny because I brought up market mapping at all of my, I'll call them tours of duty. I've done contract to contract.
Mm-hmm.
Kronos was a contract.
Kronos was a contract, yeah.
And I'm okay going gig to gig. But you ask how it's changed. Well, Shawn, we'd just rather send an email, really. Hope for the best. You know?
Yeah, and the apathy really sets in there because everyone's on the receiving side. So especially post-pandemic, right? Overwhelmed with digital communication, overwhelmed with inbound. And like I'm shocked by this all the time personally. Now I come from tech, right? So and I've grown up with email. Like I was over the moon in 95 when I started sending emails. I was like,
America
this is
Online, man.
Well, dude, I was 15, but I was used to sending faxes to my cousins in Canada when I was living in Kenya, and we'd send funny faxes to each other, like a picture of your face and some stupid message. And my dad would run in my bedroom being like, "We got to move the fax machine. That cost $15." You know? And so when email came, it's still like it's solidified in my brain as like the primary means of communicating, especially for new communication. But yeah. We're at an all-time low in terms of the receptiveness to email communication for people. And I can definitely see how, as a means of outreach, it's not great, but has anything replaced it? You know, do the networks, do the messages on various platforms actually aggregate as to a new way of doing things, or as this stratified, chaotic, entropic landscape of communication?
Well, I think on that note, and again, both of you jump in, I think what it's done is initially, to your point, very fun, very novel, very nuanced, like, whoa, this will change the world.
Right.
Again, I remember when DOS email, believe it or not.
Okay.
Canada Post is out of business. Yeah. So we got the same hype all the way through, which is nuanced.
Yeah.
I think what it's done, which is part of my message when I set up this meeting, is there's a trust issue missing.
Mm-hmm.
If all I'm going to do is spam via LinkedIn or my special email bot stuff, there's an understanding and a trust. There's basic human needs that are void now in attempting to understand somebody, their story, their career path, their fantasies, their career fantasies, what they want to do, because all of that good emotional stuff is still there. And most of the time we've taken it out by emails. Now, the piece is with the trust is where I get into the negotiation stuff. I've been doing level 1 work with Black Swan Group, Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss, hostage negotiation piece. I just started a book this week, Dr. Henry Cloud, called Trust. So there's all of these unspoken things that happen with hiring managers and with candidates, all the emotional stuff people really don't want to get into now.
Yeah, on both sides of the table, people are trying to be a little bit more stoic in their kind of transactional.
Yeah, because I can send an email. I can send
even through interviews. People come to an interview and they don't know what face to put on. And the interviewer may not know the culture of the organization they're hiring for.
Yeah.
The communication style has changed to a certain extent, but what you're talking about, like on the trust piece and just like the authenticity piece, because I lean that way as well. Like there's all these crazy tools from a recruiting perspective. AI has changed the game. Like Canada Post is going out of business. Like recruiting's going out of business. Like that's your initial thought. That's your initial fear. I've thought a lot about this. Like, and the one thing for me, even to your point about getting all these messages from people and you're like, do you do mapping? Like, how do you stand out? Yeah. Right. And in speaking to like the niche part, like that's the thing I think that as a recruiter or any person with a job right now in talent acquisition is probably a little bit worried about AI to a certain extent. Like if they're paying attention, right? You can do so much more, so much faster. what it comes down to, I think, and I'd love, like, it comes down to you being able to stand out. And you have to do that in a way that's like authentic. And the second I get a LinkedIn message that speaks some level of authenticity, I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend longer than 2 seconds on this message.
Yes.
Or if I get a phone call, you know, if that person manages to like say something that says like, okay, this isn't like overly scripted and it's personalized,
Agreed.
I will give it a little bit more time before I shut things down. How did you figure that out so early, and how should other people figure that out?
Good question. And I think that goes back to, you know, the funny joke of I wanted to be a helper. And, you know, and when I was a social worker, when I was in child welfare, I was in corrections for a bit. I wanted to help without understanding. So to your point, Martin, it's when did that, we'll say, the strategic juncture occur? Understand first. Have a genuine curiosity to size up the situation first before you make any pitch. Just understand, and more so on the candidate side of things now than anywhere before. It's like, all right, where, again, it sounds like you're looking to move from this industry to this industry. Just curious why. So how can it be done? Take time with yourself and reflect on your own curiosity. Really. Just be genuinely interested and curious in somebody else that is not, for lack of a better term, aluminum siding sales or used car sales. Rather than just a quick transaction, have a genuine curiosity in just understanding. I'm going to go in. I got a thing here I'm going to do with both of you. I've taken level 1 coursework with Chris Voss, Black Swan, hostage negotiation stuff. Really simple. First off,
how do you role play here? Are we doing the situation?
Well, no. Well, we can. First
About
off,
500 chickens.
First off, exactly. All right, give them money, their chickens are dead.
Yeah.
Your tonality and your voice sets emotionally the tone for how we're going to interact.
Yep.
And that comes in a 4-square rubric, if you will. Pitch, pacing, volume, and timbre, which is the emotional overlay, if you will. That is both hiring manager issue, candidate issue.
Yep.
So there's one really, really easy. The other thing is listening. And I thought, come on, I'm a social worker. I did career dev. I've rescued these kids. I don't need, come on, it's me. Don't you know who I am?
Right.
And what I've learned this year especially is my own blind spot. You know, you really want to get a decisive competitive edge, look to your own blind spot.
Yeah.
Listening. There's a 5-step listening staircase as per crisis people, hostage negotiators. Most of the time, I was on the first 2 steps. I want to listen to you, Martin, because I want to argue with you. I want to invalidate. I want to defend. Even though you're speaking, I've got my answer. I got my rebuttal right now.
Yeah.
I'm not really concerned about what you have to say or who you are as a person. I just like to argue with you.
You're waiting till they're done speaking.
So that's stairway 2. I was on that for a long time. Stairway 1 is, I harken back to my grandparents, where my grandfather would be behind the paper. My grandmother would be saying, you know, we got to do this, we got to do this. And he'd go, so he was there, but he wasn't there. So most of the time,
that's every married couple, my friend. At some point,
this is going to be good for both, right?
It could be.
Recruiters will benefit from this podcast. People in relationships will benefit from this.
So you're asking me the decisive competitive edge. I would suggest tone and vocality. 1, take a look at how you're speaking. 2, move to stair level 3, and you're listening for their internal world. So we're not interrupting. We're, yeah. Oh, geez. Really? Sounds like, so you start to label instead of rebut and asking why and how and what. Oh, sounds like you're in a rock and a hard place. You're, the business has gone out of, your reorg, and you're looking for something else in technology. So you're just hanging labels on. Feels like, sounds like, it appears as if. So what do I do for that? That is basic. All of my questions, both of you, what's, the hows, the whys, the whens, the wheres, they're written into labels. Because if we take a look at HR proper-ish is very good at, we'll call it interrogations.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. I've been in the GTA. I've been interviewed by high-ranking HR officials, directors, VPs of HR. Love them. Traditionalist. Why? When? Where? How? And if we take a look at the neuroscience in crisis management, labels, you come in through the side door with the emotional brain, and we're looking to just elicit more info.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get you to talk.
Mm.
So if I'm at stairwell 3 and I don't interrupt you, and I am curious about what you're telling me, and I'm just continuing on that, we move to stair level 4. You're going to start to trust me.
Yeah.
You go, oh, geez, this guy is listening. And what I've done so far, at least at Touch Bistro, since I've been there, Shawn, I'm interviewing with a lot of companies. You are the best person I've spoken to this week. Why? I speak a little bit differently. I slow everything down. I would suggest that I'm listening better than my competition. Framing better questions at certain points in time. And you have to, when people feel understood, that is a core human drive that you're taking care of as a recruiter. Well, search and rescue, call it what you want, recruitment, talent acquisition, whatever the handle is these days. But if you are talking to either a hiring manager, I don't know if I got time to go into that yet, or a candidate, if you are validating their story as is, if you're making them feel psychologically safe as is, and they understand me, they get it. What that does from a neuroscience standpoint, that releases a flood of oxytocin.
Yeah.
And same thing if anybody's got kids out there, it's a basic human drive. So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but just the basic. I had to go back, recognize my blind spot, because hey, don't you know who I am? I've done this and I've done that, but I was on that loop of continually.
Well, if nothing else, it sounds to me that people typically fall into this trap of confusing intention and means, right?
Yeah.
So we're very intention focused as humans.
Yeah.
So I would see in this sort of role, you're interviewing candidates or otherwise, and you want to align with their story, and you want to parse that information quickly, especially if you're an external recruiter and you're running through like tons of interviews a day, different clients. That call and response, kind of performative mandate seems efficient, and I think the intention always is to like try and get the best out of the answers from the candidates. But absolutely, the means is wrong. You have to take a backseat and you have to let the person reveal themselves.
Yeah. And, it's nothing new, because people say to me on my team now, oh, Shawn, you're so good. So thank you. I think that's it's Barb Bruno, it's Peter Lefkowitz, it's Lou Adler. It's anybody that has been in that external agency game for a long time. And it's coming back to being curious about the basics of just how you're speaking and how you're listening. Because the top of that stair level is level 5, or people were, and again, we take a look at FBI, CIA sort of stuff. Take a look at the 3 lives of people. There's their public life. Here's who I present to the public. Your personal life, which is what's going on just under the surface. Then there's your private life. You don't tell anybody but your psychiatrist or your therapist or whoever. And there's a guy called Everyday Spy. He was a CIA.
Oh, man, he's brilliant. I love that channel.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And this is where this comes. CIA.
Do you know this guy?
No.
It's very fun.
We should think of his name. It's funny. He's on a great brand of Everyday Spy because that just sticks in your head, right?
Yeah.
It's not his name.
It's not his name. But he is an ex-case. He was on CIA case. And this is where I got
like
this
my
from.
mom for a second. Fact check. It's not
But
fact check.
that's where you get full disclosure. And if we talk about, what happens at offers.
Andrew
Bustamante.
Right?
Exactly.
He's Busta-fantastic.
Exactly. Everyday Spy. So if I riff for a second here, what's coming out at offer? I'm understanding at offer. I got a couple situations, especially this year. Well, Shawn, I gotta check in with. They're telling you their life. I can't accept this offer till I talk to
Grandma.
Oh, okay. Well, it sounds like, again, same thing. You don't go in for the kill, for the sell. You go, okay, where does she fit in? What do you think her thoughts are? How do you want to play this? And it's just complete. It's that curiosity piece again. But once you get to that level 5 and you're consistently there as far as just listening, people will tell you the hidden. There's deal killers all over the place.
Sure.
That we often don't think about. And it's understanding that here's what I'm presenting, but here's what I'm keeping in my vest pocket.
And again, it's not to be, I think what you're suggesting here is to kind of develop a means of more accurately understanding both the motive, intention, and even cultural background, right, of the candidates if you're placing people in roles to just have the best outcome as opposed to kind of look for secrets for the sake of that. It's more like where you're entrusted perhaps by your client, a hiring organization, an organization needs to fill roles. When you're entrusted with the means of securing them, path to success and whatever their business outcome is, and having hopefully team members join their team that not only ensure the success of the organization on the balance sheet, but also the success of team members working with that new person and together as a team. It's a loaded responsibility. I think from my outsider perspective, a lot of recruiters don't necessarily take on as a responsibility. There's this, we've heard this on season 1 of this show from numerous guests that have talked about, the expected tenure of a new placement and how as a stat, they're seeing it as an average reduce. And they're saying, well, it's a kind of a market factor issue. People used to stick around for 5 years, then they stuck around for about 2. Now they're sticking around for about 6 months. And oh man, we've got to work harder, or I don't know what we have to do to churn those people, have a backup candidate ready for when, Jim quits. And I think what you're saying is actually a counterbalance, which is kind of like everyone needs, for the most part, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, employment. They need, means of earning an income to pay their bills, but also in finding and channeling purpose in life, right? So if that's a need in our society, then we have to see this HR kind of people and culture industry as is really kind of needing, or I think the nature has to change in terms of how people deal with this idea of building teams to make them more successful, to make them more fun, more connective.
I would think what you're touching on reminds me of something that I don't think gets taught in school, which is really finding ways to know yourself, right? And churn is someone essentially saying, this isn't what I signed up for.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how much of that is based on, like, a good recruiter, ideally base level recruiter, is just going to be transparent about the environment at the company, so that when a person arrives, the job that was advertised and the job that was investigated is what the job actually is.
Yeah.
And if something happens at the company because, you know, business changes and it's dynamic and we're in a crazy economy, the individual's not going to look to the recruiter or the business and blame them for those changes. But if it doesn't match what they were told, then you've got a trust issue, to your point.
Yeah.
So I think going back to the like education piece, it's because people don't know what they want, and they're sort of figuring out, especially now more than ever, because you've got sort of glorification of being an entrepreneur, glorification of being an influencer, and you're comparing yourself. So like you've got kids growing up in this environment that I don't even have like a good sense of, where it's just like bombarded with information and Instagram shorts of like all these successful people, and they're like, oh, I got to catch up, I got to be da 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 da. Meanwhile, there's all these jobs, professions, and roles out there that are perfectly respectable, perfectly challenging, and are actually like might be aligned to what they want to do. I don't know about either of you, but it took me a really long time to figure out what I actually enjoyed doing, and it was mostly by accident. I think like
Enjoy doing? What are you talking about?
there you go. Oh, well, yeah, maybe we got to do some deep work right now, right? Like, I don't know.
Entrepreneurialism and running companies isn't about enjoying yourself. No, I'm just shit disturbing. But, you know, I think you're right, but I'll say, I'll put on my employer hat and kind of contribute a little bit here, where I'll say that I have certainly, through recruiters and direct to market, you know, sourced talent, potential talent that certainly did not have a sense of who they are, let alone what they want in life, right? And that background profile wasn't complete to be able to then apply themselves to a particular role in an organization. 100%. Yeah. So I don't see that as necessarily a failure on the recruiter who brought me that kind of, you know, the potential person. They certainly did not look deep enough. They certainly also didn't kind of undertake this like, you know, EI driven kind of approach, whatever you want to brand it as, this multi-step kind of approach to like getting deep with the candidate to look at who they are and understand what they want. Because you're right, Martin, that like people might not express what they want because they might not be sure of it. But at the same time, there are clues to, when you sit down with someone, what drives them and what the passions are, and how maybe a role could enable the latent want for that discovery in their own persona, right? But at the same time, when I'm sitting down with a candidate directly, I'm trying to offer them the potential to reveal that to myself.
Yes.
And you do have to do a lot of cycling. Perhaps I find that I spend more time with candidates than I thought I would have to in order to draw that stuff out off in cases. But also that for me, the fault lies in the means of triage. You know, like it's the best candidates that I've ever found have kind of found us.
Yes. Right.
So they found StartWell and they see the connection for themselves. And they're like, that's a place where I can, you know, apply myself because it's so exciting. Like I want people who work for my company to be driven by what they see, to your point, what I'm excited by, because I think that like breathes through our brand, right? And what the people who are our clients are excited by, because that breathes through the content we produce. And so we try and do that storytelling to kind of like open that up. And if people connect with that story, then that's great. That's a 10 steps ahead of the person who sends me a resume or you know, an application through some formal channel.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, but I think that brings us full circle to this idea that like, though the milieu may change and the technology may evolve and things may become less personal in terms of the means of sourcing talent and finding jobs for the talent, the role doesn't change. The need for the role doesn't change.
No.
People still need to work and still want to feel fulfilled in life through work, hopefully.
I think, to both of your points, I think there's going to be a lot of, we're going to see where AI takes us. I question the hype on that. We just jump into a little bit of critical thinking because I remember America Online. Oh, Canada Post, no more mail.
I don't think people listening to this or watching this, other than us, understand what America Online is.
It was an email provider very early when we made the big jump to the World Wide Web not so long ago.
Did you know what America Online was?
The floppy disk.
Yes.
I signed up for the I had
Everywhere.
like 40 of them.
Hook it
I
up.
don't know how they afforded that. Those were expensive. Yeah.
Hook it up.
America Online.
America Online. So
It was probably the first, them and CompuServe were the first walled garden social networks that kind of owned the internet experience, right?
that was a big deal.
Log on through us, but stop before you log out. No, stop before you get out of our gate to the open internet
The open
and
that's right.
find the best on our services, which we can kind of monetize.
So my point being that technology is always going to change. Hence, we've had blockchain. Blockchain has always been around, peer-to-peer. I noticed peer-to-peer. The technology is there. We have AI. AI's been around for a bit.
Yeah.
Now it's sort of vogue, if we will, quite regal. Could it change? Maybe.
Vogue.
My suggestion is work life, recruiting life, hiring life is 99% emotional.
Yeah.
Whether we like it, whether we don't, and we're going to try to be as logical as we can. And what I've known since my journey with my blind spots, my own conceit, my own arrogance, there's no machine that can take that away. It's called a human fallibility. And my suggestion would be, if you really want a decisive competitive edge in this, whatever we're going to call it, in this understanding people, listening, just take a look at your listening level, take a look at how you're speaking, and just really sit with your blind spots and your failures, because I did not become a success in chicken overnight. Like, that was a lot of failure in the beginning. Same thing with tires. Same thing on automotive recruiting. Same thing all the way through. And it's taking time with your failures and understanding, okay, so there's environmental circumstances, roger that, and what did I not see? Where am I? Be loving and gentle with yourself. Be curious. And just take that time, as you said, Martin. We don't take a lot of time to be with ourselves, to understand, okay, pathways, what do I like? Do I have to get 90? I got to get a 90% honors, big company. There's still that pathway we're still pitching to people, that myth of don't take time with yourself, just do really good in school, get a good job, make a lot of money. So there's still that pathway, plus influencer pathway, plus start your own gig, plus side hustle. Yet at the same time, I have people apply to me that have 5 side hustles go bankrupt. Okay, so there you go. There's the proof right there.
Yeah.
You're not a entrepreneurial type, though they tell me they are.
Oh yeah.
But I would suggest, despite the technology, I think most of what we do, it's 99% emotional. And I think the more that we can come to terms with that and acknowledge that, that could improve things.
I'd love to hear your take on how that is challenged or inhibited or enabled, or a mixture of all of those, by the current, hybrid technological milieu then. In terms of, and there's a few ways to spin this, right? There's this kind of like people working multiple days a week at home, communicating using digital first tools with the rest of their team. Yeah. So distributed workforce. There's multi-time zone, kind of more permanent distributed workforce. There's video conferencing.
Yeah.
All of this stuff. So what's your response to that? Or how do you see through the limitations in through 2024 and beyond for organizations?
Well, it's interesting because, we all got sent home in 2020, March. because of something that happened globally. We all got online. I was doing flex stuff with you here, believe it or not.
Really?
I think I was doing hot desking with you before hot desking was a thing. And my question to everybody is, where is the emotion? Where are we, where are we losing emotion or connection? Where are we gaining emotion or connection? It's always fun to be in person.
Yeah.
It is. And there's advantages to remote. There is.
Yep.
And I guess my answer to your question is, if we take a look at a macro perspective, what is the goal? Okay. So we got people at the South Pole. They're at the U.S. weather station at the South Pole. They're remote at the South Pole. They can work anytime they want. Okay. So what is the goal?
Mm-hmm.
What is the goal if you got people on trans-Pacific flights doing gigs? Okay. What is the goal? And I don't think that we know what the goal is, really, from a business perspective. You got people all over the world working, sort of. Okay. What's the goal?
Short of profit and, short-term gain in terms of efficiency measurement, the extra factors that involve, justified tenure and local culture within organization, all of that stuff, I think, people don't spend enough. Organizations very rarely spend time actually defining those wants and what, a template for success is for their people to feel belonging and empowerment and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, without defining those things, you can't know what the best way to create the means to success for your team is. And you don't maybe see where the red flags are in the tools that you use to facilitate work, right?
Yeah. And I think everyone, prior to pandemic, hot desking prior to pandemic was a thing because the technology was there to allow for fluidity. No longer 9 to 5. Keep in mind that what's happening right now, the back to office piece and how we've been living the past 120 years dates back from Henry Ford, and that's Taylorism. That's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. 9 to 5,
Monday to Friday. It was a construct of the factory life for efficiency.
So you got 8 hours work, 8 hours sleep, 8 hours fun and family. And due to deep inertia of humans, we've carried that. We're still carrying that into post-pandemic world where we got people distributed, we got people hybrid, we got people in Antarctica, we got people on planes working, but we're still pulling, 1910, 1890 mindset or paradigms. And I think it's worth a discussion. Hence, I think I pitched to both of you. Wouldn't it be neat to get some very cool people who you've talked to into your East Wing party room for a half day and just sort of hash this out really as to what do we want to do? What is the goal here for everybody? So we want to be profitable, yet at the same time, by allowing someone to work in Antarctica, okay, fun, very cool, very niche, very kitschy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they last 2.5 years. They go to another place that allows them to work at the North Pole. So it's worth, again, facilitating conversation. And I would suggest to both of you what we need in GTA Toronto proper, because it's a busy place. I just told you, it's lots of startups, Martin, but we all know who we know. It's a small
world.
And what would be really cool, maybe next year, I don't know, just pitching this, is just start to facilitate these subjects, these conversations.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing that actually, and we kind of did that first soft test of an event, I guess, last week.
Yeah.
And it was a panel, but I think this roundtable format for to actually see the discussion happen in person,
Mm-hmm.
and then record it would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Get multiple perspectives on
Love it.
on a topic per month.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, and it's not just and really dig in. I think a big thing is getting getting all sides of a table at the table. So people from organizations that are hiring that have interesting policies on how they tackle these issues to actually talk about them.
Yeah.
Right? And not just a bunch of recruiters saying, yeah, this is what my clients should be doing and so on. Right?
Yeah. Agreed. 100%.
I fully agree with this. We're pulling these like 9 to 5 ancient, the resume hasn't changed since like Edison or Franklin, I forget which, like wrote out the first sort of like recorded popularized resume. So that hasn't changed. 9 to 5 hasn't changed. And we're in this wild, like it took a pandemic for us to embrace the efficiency and benefits of using technology. There's obviously trade-offs that you have to make, and those are interesting. I'm curious, like at this roundtable discussion, the question of where do you start first and how do you go about it?
Well, that would take me, and again, I'm open to riff on this.
Yeah.
What is the goal? And the reason being is of all my travels, I've been at a couple of startups that tanked. They went under. I've been on a couple of operations teams that done, gone. There's your box. Goodbye.
Right.
And I've been studying a thing called the theory of constraints for about 5 years now. And it's from a book in the 80s called The Goal. A lot of very just basic systematic organization questions. What is the goal? What is the barrier to achieving the goal?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we in relation to the goal? What is the direction and magnitude of change required to move from status quo or inertia to realizing the goal? So I would suggest to facilitate these discussions is, part of this gig is, okay, in people and culture, in hiring, in search, in recruiting, what's the goal, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Really? We know from a business standpoint, there's net profit and competitive advantage, okay? Beyond that, what we have done, what we do, what's the goal? What's the weak link? But that's sort of my...
No, I like that. I like that as a kind of like a basis for all of these discussions, not necessarily as it ends to itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so true, man. And we've got enough content so we can just keep talking and not worry about the recording bit of it. But like, but I think it's very interesting, right? Like the no bullshit take on this, and maybe this is also worth cutting in to the episode, but like, the way I look at things, right? Being a technologist who's done work in all different industries, like so many different industries in my life, and worked on different continents and stuff. Yeah. I think, everyone, of course, has geo-specific blinders on, wherever they are, but especially in North America, that we forget about in North America because this place is so separate from the rest of the world. We have living links through our ethno-cultural diversity in this city to a lot of the world. However, working teams, particularly in the majority of industries of our city specifically, which are professional services, the banks, and then the insurance companies, all these big institutional enterprises, are limited because they're still, for the most part, structured by these archaic hierarchies of politic. And without stripping those, there's no way to, undertake like innovative ways of self-empowerment and tap the collaborative potential of the workforce and even, and this is the interesting thing, even invert the expectation of the work-life balance to say you're Judy first and second Judy from accounting. Like, so the thing is, you've got this career history of people working in the machine, and the machine has robbed them of the potentiality of their being.
Yes.
I personally have no expectations. I don't give a fuck. I don't have any expectations for those organizations to magically transform into unicorns, into like flying butterflies and like, alleviate the suffering of their like paper cut handed employees. You know, that I don't care. But what's interesting for me is from the lens of the kind of scrappy startups and the SMBs and the companies that are kind of like have to be in control of their destiny.
Yes.
And that are out there earning their daily bread.
Yes.
You hope, if they're not pumped with VC capital, that they can answer these questions. They can start from a small, you know, seedling of want and grow any plant that they desire. And I mean, I always tell people that are especially bootstrapping to say, well, question these things. Like, what do you want your life to be? Because all this bullshit, the Silicon Valley bullshit of saying, do you want a lifestyle business or do you want a venture capital funded fucking rocket ship, right? Like, lifestyle business should not have any, in fact, it should be glorified. It should not have any tar on its varnish. Like, I look at this stuff and I say, well, how do you want to live? Because business enables that, right? And your toils should be meritorious.
Yeah.
For employees, for owners, for everyone. Like, that's how societies become greater, is when people feel fulfilled and, you know, take siestas or sit by the piazza and, like, you know, smoke naked and all these things.
Smoke naked.
That was my little allusion to European life, right? But like, that's the thing that we're robbed of in North America, because I think the built environment is so stoic, right? And it's so like dirty and gray.
Yeah, it's agreed. And it's we're still pulling that paradigm from the 1800s of 150 years ago. We'll call it from the Industrial Revolution with us. Sorry. Sorry about that.
Might as well. We're still recording.
Sorry, okay. And that is worth a discussion on its own, separate and apart from what we just talked about. We go, okay, so let's get on the table these paradigms we're backpacking with, and we've been backpacking for a while. Yeah. Yet technology is enabling this fluidity or this flexibility, hence to your point, that is a little good, a little bad. We're not sure how, you know, it's a power wobble. We're not sure how to make sense of it yet. And, you know, taking the time to unpack that industrial revolution shit, it doesn't work for us. Yeah. But we're still carrying it.
I see so many armchair sociologists say this. Elon Musk, you asshole. You are so rich and you're wasting your money annoying people with X. Why don't you instead end poverty or stop malaria or blow up Vladimir Putin? You know, like the idea of this kind of throwing stones on the potentiality. And at the same time, I don't see enough people saying, okay, in the face of the threat of AI that will take away triage jobs, do we see that as a means of firing 20% of our workforce for greater efficiencies at a lower cost? Or can that alleviate that workforce quotient to do different cool things?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So like, it's like, there is that whole thing, but like, again, this is not content necessarily for like, it's not a packaged content for an episode of a podcast, but it's like the means, I think, to push the dialogue and the conversations, especially the roundtables, to say like, if we can curate them well enough, to have people at the table that are challenging the status quo of the post-industrial complex.
Because part of this, you know, again, that theory of constraints piece is, it's the blind spot piece is challenge my assumptions, challenge my beliefs, and all that stuff that I was carrying were just assumptions about this is the way it has been, this is the way it should be. So if we take a look at that piece, that industrial revolution piece, that 9-to-5 piece, is that a belief system? Are those assumptions that have yet to be, we'll call them, exposed and in a gentle, loving way challenged, because people like to hang on. There's an immunity to change. Right. So once you start digging and you surface those assumptions and those belief systems that have been around for a long time, that's...
people get scared.
It's almost ironic that as a founder or business owner, entrepreneur, whatever, that you have this drive to challenge status quo for whatever product or service that you're building, but you don't do it at the same time with how work gets done within your organization.
Exactly.
Because it's such a loaded topic, right? Like, it's so loaded. Like, also remember that, like, if you're putting a product or service in the market, your customers are subject to whatever their dogmas are and routines are.
Yeah.
Right? So there's the expectation of labor to perform, even present itself in this way. People wanting to work. Like, you hear dumb shit from candidates, man. Dumb shit. Talking about this topic of, like, enabling people to be themselves and their truest self, and how distant, then questioning how distant people are from that. And, like, can you, even as a team or a company, enable that? Well, not for everybody, because a lot of people are too far from themselves to be able to go on that journey.
Yes.
Sorry, can't invest in you. It's too expensive.
Yes.
Seriously, like, whew. And but so the point is that, like, you can have change without a revolution, but you can also be a revolutionary and not embrace change.
Yeah.
The way I look at it. So, like, being a startup founder, I mean, there's so much that you're faced with changing. And also, this is another thing. You see it when you work at a startup, right?
Yeah.
Where the visionary, if they're visionary leadership, they're not necessarily about being leaders. Typically, they're trying to do something cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're obsessed with what they're doing. That's cool. Everything around them to do the organization is like, someone else figured this shit out. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Why do I want to give a fuck about Judy's life? Oh my God, who is that? Wasn't she Martha? Oh, she's Judy now? That's not their concern, because they're like, their whole perspective on reality is framed by the product market fit, the possibility of what they're trying to achieve. The company side of it normally isn't at least attached to the visionary founder type of person. And that's another convolution of business in the modern era, is that, like, most startups are actually run by greedy fucks. They're not run by people obsessed with cool.
Interesting.
That's a misnomer. Like, Silicon Valley purports this ethos of, like, solutions can solve society, right? And businesses are the ways to achieve that. But if you really, like, take all the whatever top invested in companies and their leadership and the founders, and you line them up, they're not going to survive the firing range of cool. Very few of them are actually cool. Most of them are, like, total. I mean, you've seen this, right? With all the, like, Theranos type people. Like, they're all, like, morally ambiguous, greedy egomaniacs. And you have to be to survive the VC funding cycles and to get something to an IPO in under 5 years and, like, make $1 billion,
That's the glorified piece, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like, to your point about the lifestyle business, like, as an entrepreneur myself, I'm leaning way more to the lifestyle business approach of things, and I think more and more people are.
Yeah.
Because the veil is off on
Pump and dump.
what that actually is. Like, okay, you're going to get all this money, and it's going to be, you're going to do things with it. You're going to make mistakes, and now you have new bosses, by the way. You signed up for this if you're a founder or entrepreneur, whatever, and you signed up for all this stuff, and you want to focus on the thing that you wanted to focus on. But because you got all this money, you inorganically grew, and now you have adopted all these challenges and problems you never even actually knew what you were signing up for. Like, going back to the job description.
Yeah, you didn't know.
You didn't know that at some point, because you want to build this big thing, you are going to have to care about your employee base, because you have new KPIs, and those KPIs are growth, and that's tied to the VC, and kind of going back to, like, the preference, like, for me, like, lifestyle's interesting and more appealing at this time, because I've seen so much of, like, the VC startup space, and, like, I'm curious, like, you've had such a diverse range of experiences, and like I was on the industrial side myself, like that seems to probably be pervasive. Like you're at that spot now. Like you worked in corporate, you worked up through, you know, corporate ladders, and now you're more on your kind of like okay with being a contractor and, you know, being able to take that risk. Some of that comes with privilege and experience and all that fun stuff, but like there is a true mentality shift. I think it's happening faster for folks.
Agreed. Yes, 100%. And, you know, it's interesting. Again, I could be here all day, you guys. I don't want to go. But I don't come from a long line of police officers. I come from a long line of general contractors, tradespeople. I was the black sheep in the family. So they went job to job. There was nothing. They started a gig. They had to go out and about and look for next construction project. That was the way it was for us a long time ago, prior to the Industrial Revolution, where you went gig to gig. And I've had a lot of people tell me of all ages, "Oh, Shawn, how did you do that? Weren't you afraid?" And
you must be terrified every day that there's no gig.
I had a scope, I had a start, I had a finish date. Okay, most of the time it was straight shot. See ya. And all the while I was doing that job, I was out and about looking for next gig. I took a 7-week, I got a call once out of the blue. I got a text message from a vendor. "Shawn, we need somebody to come in for 7 weeks to take care of the overload for machine shop. Are you down for it?" "Yep, be there in the morning." And that 7 weeks turned into 6 months, which converted to something else. So there's always luck, there's odds, and there's a whole bunch of things. But if we go back to paradigms, and that might be maybe some of these roundtable questions, is we've got the 21st century paradigm. We're still carrying an 18th century paradigm. We got everything in between. And you go gig to gig, everything's cool. You got a confidence piece, but at the same point in time, it's that mindset of, even though you're doing your job, you're out and about. You're always out and about, networking, talking, seeing if there's any gaps in the, you know, anything of that sort. And I don't know if you'd call that entrepreneurship. I don't know if you'd call that crazy. I don't know what you'd call it, but I talk to people that want a guaranteed full-time job, plus pension, plus private car, plus a private jet at Pearson Airport. And I'm so sorry. We don't do that here.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's really interesting. I think we're at this kind of like, in North America, we're at this interesting juncture where I think for so long there's been a cultural dichotomy, right? That's existed between, I hate the labeling, but blue collar and white collar.
Yeah.
In the 80s, the white collar was at its height, right? And since then, it's gotten all kerfuffled, mainly because of technology and the breakdown of the top tier earning kind of access to $1 million plus, you know, annualized or whatever the fucking number is.
Yeah.
100,000 plus even, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's interesting. I think that's a big, that schism in the dichotomy is a source of a lot of angst and a lot of misunderstanding about even potentiality. Right?
Agreed.
People don't necessarily go into a job with an entrepreneurial mindset.
No.
So they think of it as this thing where they're parking themselves. Then they have anxiety. "Oh, I'm only 24 and I don't even know how to put makeup on my face yet, even though I have 1 million subscribers on TikTok that want to see how to put makeup on. I mean, is that my side hustle, or is being a barista my main passion?" And you know, like there's all this like conflict. That was a real person that we hired.
Okay.
Yeah, there's all this convolution because I don't think people think of a job as something they can apply that themselves through and discover themselves through, right? And be entrepreneurial about it, and be like, a job can throw different things at you every day. You still have one job for one company, and you're still doing different. You're a contractor internally. Entrepreneurship.
Agreed.
Creative industries understand this, by the way. This is an office problem. If you talk to people in like Poncho will tell you, he does film set stuff, and it's like you got to come together as a team, and you're like putting things together, and when you're a gaffer, you might be holding a boom, I don't know, thing, and then you might be doing some lighting, you might be doing different things, but you're still working on the same, production.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a different thing. But that is a lot of fodder maybe for the roundtable, is to unpack the future of white collar, right? Like, what does office work mean today? And how can you learn from different creative industries, from whatever you call it, skilled labor?
Yeah.
There's a lot there. We'll talk more about that. Cool.
Love it.
Okay, we're done the recording portion of the podcast.
This, I gotta tell you guys, it's been a fucking blast.
Right? This is fun.
Party time.
Yeah.